So, hello everyone. My name is Josefa Domingos. I'm a physiotherapist that's been working in Parkinson for the last 20 years. And I'm joined here by John Dean, which is a speech therapist. And we combine our knowledge to try to tackle these difficult topics. And today, obviously, it's a topic of interest, because if there's one thing that everyone has in common is we do want to keep our minds as sharp as possible. So I think it's, of all the different people that we have the privilege to meet, that is always something very common and a concern.
Definitely a topic of high interest. And over the years, the answers seem to change a little bit, but it's always the most requested topic.
Okay, so let us start off by being very practical. What I would say is, like, this is a question that people often place, which is the best exercise? And with this program, we want to take it a step forward where we say, okay, so which is the best exercise for XYZ? And still, it is a question that will be challenging to answer, but I think for us to be able to give at least key messages, I have placed this, I would say, challenge on myself. So if I have someone that asks me this question, and in 30 seconds I have to say something useful, this is what I would say, okay? What I would say is, in light of the evidence that we have at this moment, the scientific evidence allows us to say that any form of exercise will potentially help improve our global cognition. So no matter what you're doing in terms of exercise, it is expected to improve. What we also know is that aerobic exercise specifically is the one that shows better results. But I'm sure you all will agree that the best exercises are those that will match closely to the challenges that I go through on a daily basis. And for this, we did challenge you with the questionnaire so that we could get an insight and also somehow challenge you to think about which are the moments that I feel that I have more difficulties with cognition globally, right? So let me share with you what some of the results that people share with us on their questionnaires. And the first one that showed up was shopping. So this person says, okay, where I feel that I have most difficulties thinking or organizing my thoughts is during shopping. Then we had several people around communication. So verbal conversations where I have to respond quicker than comfortable. Also recalling details of events which often do not match others' recollection. So you try and tell a story and someone says, no, that's not exactly how it was. This interrupts your thought, and then it's very difficult for you to keep your chain of thought. Recalling words and names, that's a very typical one. Mm-hmm. So evoking, and maybe it comes to you a little bit later, but in the time that you need it, it doesn't seem to come out. So that is regarding conversation itself. So communication as a key area where we have more challenges. And then coming in stress. So when people are under stress, it seems that the cognition will be more challenged. So people shared when I feel pressured to make a decision or answer a question. Stressful situations where I am asked questions. Then we also had another key area, which would be paying attention. So complex sorting out, paying attention, which was never a problem. So the person doesn't perceive that I didn't used to have the situation where I was able to talk and watch TV at the same time, and now maybe I'm struggling more. So paying attention, doing 2 or 3 things at once. And this will be a very important topic that we will discuss a lot throughout this talk, because what we define as doing 2 things at once is particularly different in Parkinson. So grabbing onto that example that I gave, I'm able to watch a movie and somebody asks me a question and I can talk to that person, come back to the movie and follow what was going on. But maybe if I'm in a standing position, I will struggle to keep my balance while I'm watching the movie and then somebody talks to me, right? So there's automatic functions, namely posture and balance and movement, that gets affected in Parkinson and makes it more challenging for you to be able to divide your attention with other tasks. So I would say that's almost like a new task, something that was automatic and now it's not. And so now it became another task. Okay, and we'll come back to that later. And then also perceiving this, which is people mentioned that there were certain circumstances, like a late evening or when the person was really tired, so fatigue, or in loud and busy environments. So these are situations where you can easily identify that I'm going to have more difficulty. Now let's make this connection with exercise. What can I do for these situations in the routines that I do that would help me in them? You can imagine that if it's about conversation and talking, then that means I have to be able to have some sort of social interaction or social activity or exercise activity that will require me to be able to interact with others if I think of improving conversation. This would be basic, right? But I wanted to grab onto something that might not be so. And so I grabbed onto the shopping, a more clear activity. So someone comes into the clinic and they say, you know what, I'm really struggling going to shopping. There can be 1,000 reasons why the person is struggling. Depends on the store, depends on the noise, depends on a lot of things. But just giving you an example that's more related to memory. So sometimes people would say, I get disorganized and I might not remember what I'm going to go get, or I forget 2 or 3 things that I knew that I should have brought. Honestly, I think there's tips and strategies that just take a list and reduce that if that was the issue. In this case, I'm just showing you a very simple exercise where I'm challenging the gentleman to be able to go around touching several objects. Imagine I start off with 6, then at 10, and I want him to say what it is. So that's evoking quickly a word. And then for each one of them, I want him to give it a different name. So imagine he's touching on the chair and he's saying bananas. He's touching on the bed and he's saying grapes. This type of exercise that I'm imagining that most of you have already had contact in therapy or even in the exercise world. Most of the therapists are at this moment very conscious that cognition has to be included in whatever exercise we are doing. And this is a very simple one because we are training walking around and helping him train how to keep focus on what he was trying to, on his list. Simple, but adequate to this person, right? Doesn't mean, but I think it's a simple idea if you want to try it out at home. That's why I brought the video. But now imagine I have a group and I'm thinking, you know what? People do often mention that walking around in busy places, and passing through small spaces and turning and making decisions is quite difficult because it's something that is so commonly discussed. We can incorporate these activities into groups as well. So just a simple example that I'm showing you there will be they're going from one wall to the other. This is the type of boot camp activities that you might see people doing. And I just want them to go through a whole, alternating their attention between the one wall and the other. And above all, negotiating which directions to go and not to bump into each other. So this is me trying to get into a little bit of what might happen on a daily basis. And basically that's what the therapist will do. And professionals is try to think about where are people struggling and how can we incorporate this into whatever exercises we do. Okay. So this means there's 2 lines of thought here. I can have 2 strategies. One, I'm thinking about, okay, what type of exercise I can keep well. I want to keep my brain as active as possible. And we know the challenges of Parkinson and how it progresses. And so we read more and more. So people will obviously know that cognition is an area that should be worked, just like your muscles. And so we can have, okay, I want to do exercises that I will feel comfortable or I will trust that will help me also with cognition. That's one type of exercise. And then it's like, no, you know what? I'm really struggling with ABCD, which is what you see here, are the different cognitive domains that are identified with research that will be more compromised in Parkinson. Okay, so just imagine we are doing a group exercise. If I do one exercise of each one of these domains, I know that I've helped everyone that's in the room, even though everyone is very different. If I have an individual session with someone, then I can really pinpoint a cognitive domain that I know the person is struggling with. So you see that when we say which is the best exercise, obviously there's a lot of things that we have to think about is what type of context that we are. And I will talk a lot about groups because I know that's mostly what people are doing. The goal of our session today is to be able to give you knowledge to understand globally what are we doing for cognition, what is possible. And so it will be for you to see, okay, in general, how can I improve my cognition? What type of exercise would make sense? And then also, I want you to keep attentive to this because this is a growing area where we are having more and more research supporting specific exercise for specific cognition. So we might not have it still strong everywhere and accessible to everyone, but the truth is just keep attentive because this is an area that will be progressing positively in this case. So if we think about, okay, generally, what type of exercise would make sense in terms for cognition? What I can share with you is very important that we understand that any symptom in Parkinson has to have a strategy for how we manage it. And so it won't only be exercise. There's a lot that also complements it a lot. And so it's understanding that, making sure that we are clearly understanding what is going on, what is the problem, and then also understanding what medications should be working in our favor and not against us. Okay, so that's important to also understand that all these work together. And there's an interesting one now, which is social activity. And we know at this moment how important it is for people to be able to be engaged socially because it helps improve cognition. But today, obviously, we wanted to focus on the exercises itself. But before I continue, I want to really highlight this, the diagnosis and us understanding how do I learn about my difficulties. So imagine if I do have an exercise group as a therapist, if people come in with severe difficulties motor, like in a wheelchair, or if they just got diagnosed, I am able to adapt very easily the physical exercises. When we think about cognition, that is much more challenging. So I can have someone that is in a wheelchair for some reason, but will be very cognitively engaged, right? So that doesn't mean that we associate that just because someone is physically very, very well, that there might not be underlying cognitive issues. Okay, so it's not one means the other. And what I want to say with this is that if we are choosing an exercise program and we identify already, I have cognitive difficulties that have been identified, and the doctor said I have to train my cognition, and I jump into a class that is titled cognition, that means I might be having more difficulty because in a group setting, it's very difficult to, I'm looking for the right word, is to be able to have everyone at the same time processing information at the same rhythm. So if I hope that makes it clear, it's very for us to think all at the same rhythm. Can you imagine how challenging? But so what we want to highlight is we just want you to think about, if I am specifically dealing with something, then the type of exercise that I should be looking should be more and more specific to me.
Okay. It's kind of we used to call this kind of one room schoolhouse, like a little house on a prairie where you have people at all grade levels. And of course, we're all about the same age or thereabouts, but it's more just the capacities. And somebody might grab something really quickly and answer it. And all of a sudden, the people who hadn't quite gotten there are going to have, well, I missed it now. And it becomes challenging. Yeah. Cognition much more than physical stuff.
And I think the importance here is it has to do with expectations, because I go and join, if, for example, I join a dance class and the dancing is more about me mimicking what the teacher is doing. So the teacher is doing nice, slow movements and I'm just mimicking. The level of cognition is very reduced. So that's okay. If I go to a class where the teacher was changing the exercises, she's challenging your cognition more. So that means that it is the cognitive component that is too strong for that specific person. Okay, so I hope that throughout the session this will become clearer. And another key message that I want to pass quickly is about reversible causes. So if you are dealing with symptoms, please know that cognitive symptoms fluctuate just like the motor symptoms. So there will be specific moments, specific issues that will make it worse or better, right? And this was just keywords that people said, particularly fatigue was the most important factor that people identified, that it was the factor that increased the difficulty on terms of cognition. Then we had sleep. After a bad night's sleep, we know that obviously it's harder for us to concentrate and to focus our attention as well. The times of the medication was pretty interesting because we did ask if the medication, if you perceived that if it were improved or not. Most people said they didn't really notice. But the truth is just understanding that when I'm having some difficulty, I should always try to identify, is my medication working at this moment or not, to see how it affects your alertness. Okay, this is ways for us to be able to make sure that now when we go to the next step, which is, okay, now everything else is organized, and what I want to focus now is, okay, what type of exercise will help me? When we think about overall strategies that people use in cognition, you might hear your doctors talk about, or professionals talk about, cognitive rehabilitation or cognitive training. They tend to use the words differently. It depends what they're marketing. Yes. And what you might have, for example, the use of paper and pencil exercises, books with cognitive exercises, and then obviously more modern. I think paper and pencil is being used less and less. And then you'll have more like cognitive games and exercises that people might see on their phone, for example, the computer. So this is what is meant by cognitive rehabilitation, because I know there was a question regarding this. And it's often done either by psychologists, by speech therapists as well in the line of communication, or occupational therapy.
It's different because in the U.S., I think not a lot of psychologists are doing those interventions, where in the EU, it's quite common. Occupational therapists often get involved in this. They have a very good cognitive background and good psychology background. And in speech therapy, obviously, we incorporate it, particularly as it intersects with language. But we also do, if you come to our class, if you come to my voice, speech, and communication class, we're doing a lot of dual tasks. But I'm inspired by someone, so that happens that way.
Okay. So we think about more calm cognitive rehabilitation there. I'd say calm. Now, we have, how about truly the definition, what we think most when we think about exercise. But remember, speech is exercise, cognition is exercise. But when we think about physical exercise, where is the evidence at this moment? Well, it's overwhelming, but I will try to summarize some of them that have been highlighted. And I can tell you that we have the most evidence for treadmill training, not only for improving walking and several outcomes in terms of motor outcomes, physical things, but also now in terms of cognition. I won't go into depth in terms of the protocols that you see here, but most research studies have a very organized protocol that most of the times it's very challenging for therapists to actually apply it in your life. But so you get an idea, this was one session a day, 45 minutes, 3 times a week for 4 weeks, right? Seems reasonable. One of the limitations we have in research at this moment is we know that exercise has to be ongoing. So if you think about, yes, I'm going to improve my cognition by doing a program like this, 4 weeks after, we have to continue some sort of exercise, right? So the treadmill training was one of them. Then we had also highlighted tango. So learning tango and adapted tango, of course, there's movements that should be probably removed, namely the stepping backwards, but a partnered tango or doing tango on your own both showed benefits. But this is another example of an activity. And then we had also activities regarding using technology. So the Wii Fit also was highlighted as a potential way. And what they did actually in this study was interesting because it wasn't only using the Wii, it was also combined with exercise. So it was a combination of stretching and strengthening and mobility exercises, 30 minutes of those, and then 30 minutes of doing the Wii Fit. The results were very similar for both. So it wasn't very optimistic, but I do want you to know the options that are out there. Another one that then I can highlight is obviously using things that we might not associate so much, but Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and dance, particularly dance. There is so enormous list of papers that have favored dance in terms of cognition. Now you could say what type of dance at this moment, again, at the light of the evidence that we have now, people will probably say any dance is good, but we can think about, okay, if I want to train more memory, if I have a dance teacher that is teaching me sequences, that is making me memorize all those sequences, that's probably working more on my memory. But if I have a dance teacher that's changing movements, she's probably challenging more the speed of thinking that you have on transitioning from one to the other. So you see the cognitive thing components that you can go get from one format or the other are particularly different. Everyone doing okay? Yes? So now the good news here is understanding that we know now that by combining cognition and movement is the type of training that best is giving us results in terms of cognition, okay? And what this means is there are probably things that you're already doing. And I think it's important for us to think about what are people doing and give you some sort of comfort that you are already working on this, even though you might not consider. So the Parkinson groups are now combining these type of elements. You have the dance groups, the boxing, the karate, cycling. It's endless, the options that exist at this moment.
You missed pickleball, which is taking over the planet. Ping pong and pickleball are taking over the planet.
Different cognitive domains, but overall they all improve cognition. We did have a question for you in the questionnaires that we sent out before. For anyone that's here that maybe didn't see it, we like to work on the information that you send us through the questionnaires so that we are discussing specifically the problems that you have placed here, the people that are here. And this was one where we have what type of exercises and treatments have people done that they believe improve their cognition. And you can see the list. Like you can see rock steady boxing. Boxing has, I'll go into it into a moment. We have specifically dual task, climbing. Let me see what I would highlight here. Bikes. So you see them all. Here's an interesting comment here, which is before falling, which is one of my greatest concerns is people are integrated into groups and then unfortunately something happens and then it's like, okay, how do I reinvent my exercises and get a new strategy? And then speech therapist.
Yeah. It's interesting they're using one of the branded approaches. And again, if you're just doing loud on that part, that's fine, but you really have to find a way to add in the cognitive component because we use our cognition all the time when we're having conversations. And if we happen to be walking or doing something physical while it's happening, then, that adds another layer. That's kind of what we try to get to in our dual task classes online.
And now let's go through, things that exist and things that people have access. And we are very fortunate that Innova was bold enough, specifically Sonia, was bold enough to accept, you know what? I don't seem to see anyone specifically doing a dual task class, exercise class, right? So, and so we had the privilege to try it out and we have been doing it maybe 2-3 years.
2021.
And I can easily talk about it because it's free. You can all go. And so please do join us if you want to challenge yourself a little bit more.
Thanks to the Innova Parkinson Order Center in Sonia. She does an amazing job of helping your community get access to so many programs. And we're just one of many. We're really lucky.
So we have been doing this experience in terms of how could we organize a class where we can have a little bit of each component, try to make it as fun as possible. Remember, it's a group setting. And then we were also fortunate to go and meet many of you that are here on the call in person and try out exercises that we can do in person. And this type of class, I'm just going to give you an example for anyone that might not know it. We have a physical component. Remember how dance and movement and resistance also improves cognition. We have a voice component. Okay. And then obviously we have very specific cognitive challenges that we wanna add into the class. Either more visual or spatial. You'll see when the ball shows up, you have specific movements that you have to enact.
Boo.
When we think about what is the relevance of this type of challenge, and then I added in this comment here of someone saying, when I'm on the phone and my husband tries to talk to me, I get frustrated as well. So this is the type of training that helps us be more resilient to the stress of alternating our attention from on a daily basis, right? So even if you have tried it and you think, it was very challenging, it does become easier as people try it. This is an important message because you get used to the method. So sometimes just coming in once and not really giving that effort might not be, it's at the end, it's supposed to be a positive experience, but we have to challenge ourselves to be a little bit out of our comfort zone if we do want to grow in terms of that type of training.
It just seems like the first session for everybody is a little daunting. We have the microphones on. We're watching everybody, so we may be interacting directly with you if you're doing it right or need a little correction. But usually people get ensconced pretty quickly, and then it's kind of our little group. We have our little unit. It's nice.
Okay, so this is one example of something that is accessible. And now boxing is also something that early on we started, when we hear about adding in cognition, the sequences of boxing is the greatest example that we can give in terms of exercise, where people have to really challenge their brain at the same time as they are doing an exercise, which is actually quite enjoyable. So, punching things seems to be enjoyable. And if we add in the cognition at the end of a class, you have a combination of different types of exercises. If you do, for example, rock steady boxing, you do have lots of different components of that class, which is not only the punching, which will potentially help you to be able to also have, I would say, the comfort of knowing that your cognition is being challenged. We, of course, in case so we could have individual situations when we talk about sequences. Even if you're at home and you want to challenge yourself to apply boxing, it's pretty easy for you to get access to exercises online that have simple boxing sequences. Then obviously you are very welcome to join us again. We have the privilege to invite you to these sessions, and it's always difficult because it's like we're biased, but no, this is classes. I'm sure there's others, but this is the work we know, and so we share it with you, where we can have a little mixture. We can use maybe a little bit of boxing. At the same time, one of the good things or challenges of the good advantages of these online things, we can involve the whole family, and boxing seems to be something that couples actually like to do together.
And honestly, you can find this information actually on the calendar for IPMDC, although we do this with a different organization, but this is how committed Sonia is to this community. She talks about anything that she liked, anything that's good, but that's a program that we do on Fridays with another group. Okay.
So when we think about, exercises, remember, we keep focus on what is the best exercise. These are all different options that all are good and valid at this moment, specifically to improve global cognitive function in Parkinson's disease. Dancing, as I said, has the strongest evidence, okay? Different types of dancing. One of the challenges that I was incorporating here, but basically, it's if we have music and, we add in cognitive challenges like, okay, every time I lift up my arms, I want you to close your arms, right? So we can have different ways to challenge groups. I would say keep an eye for it. I'm sure it's coming. The use of music is transforms the exercises in much more humorous and also fun.
There's a lot of research about the way the music goes past the area of the brain that's impacted by the Parkinson's. The basal ganglia goes below that area. It's really very interesting how music changes things.
And even if I have somebody that maybe has more difficulties in terms of cognition, they're just following along. So remember how those different levels of cognition in terms of mimicking just a teacher, as long as I have a movement going, the person will also follow. So I think it's, even if you feel that the classes might be hard, as long as you're moving, you are getting better with it. This is a nice video that I like to show in terms of, obviously, this is accessible to people online, and you can see different types of people, again, different type of physical components and cognitive components, but good or bad, people are trying to follow as quickly as I change the movements. I often get feedback that, it was too fast for me. And the truth is, I might have moments where we are just enjoying the music. I might have moments where we are memorizing 3 or 4 movements, and then we're just repeating those 3 or 4 movements throughout the music. So I go through different levels of cognition throughout the class. And if you are really having fun with the music that you really love, I really don't mind that the person is having that fun, because that's the best way for us to learn, is when we are really engaged in something that we love. Okay.
Those are the Zumba Gold programs on Tuesdays and Thursdays with the IPMTC.
The style is particularly different. The model is particularly different from typical dance. So that's why it's just highlighting, justifying why it's different.
Fun to watch.
And of course, other options that are out there that is also coming in strong is things with virtual reality. So I think that's one of the strongest ones was coming out.
And augmented reality too, with Stroll and some of the other products. So it can either be completely immersive, or now that they have goggles where you can see the room, you can see the space. And I think that may be coming more just because it's a little safer and it's a little bit less likely to cause some of the vertigo and some of the other issues that people sometimes report when it's all the way on their face.
The ones that I've been seeing, like on social media, they are now creating these like device support systems where you are inside and you are supported in terms of elastics, so that you can get all enthusiastic in whatever you're doing, what type of exercise or activity, and you don't, I'm just going to play with this, kill yourself going forward against the TV or something, right? So it's the safety issues were questioned, and so they created this.
100% real. You see a lot of videos of people running and hitting the television by accident or falling.
Again, so it's options, but I don't think it's that type of option that is accessible to everyone. But it's important to know that they exist.
That's also isolating, Joe. I think it's better to be in classes or groups.
Okay, so another example is obviously water therapy, hydrogymnastics, hydrotherapy, whatever your community calls it. And this was actually, let me highlight, there was a study that was done where they compared people with Parkinson with people without Parkinson, doing an activity where they added in cognition, but using cycling. And they found that while people were doing cycling, the people with Parkinson and without Parkinson performed equally, right? Which means that if we are doing a motor task that is considered easier, that our cognitive resources are more free to be more active. So what they showed with the study is like, if I'm walking, if this study was done with walking, then sure enough, the people with Parkinson would have more difficulty. Why? Because that I mentioned before, balance, posture, and walking are highly affected by when we add indoor tasking. And this study was interesting because it just showed, well, you know what? Maybe I can train my brain on something that I can keep my motor going without me compensating so much. So I think this was a good example. If you have a bicycle, it's a good place for you to train also and adding those cognitive exercises. So if everything's okay in the chat and everything's all good, I will go to our second part of our session here, which is trying to think, okay, what am I looking for? Where is the research interest at this moment? And I hope that we will get more and more studies like this, which is we know that exercise in general improves global cognitive function, but we need to know which type of exercise improves which type of cognitive domain, so that we can do better exercise prescription for people. Never losing sight that most people usually work in groups, so that we need this knowledge so we can be more effective in what we do. And so this was a nice review that basically showed that a little bit more than what we knew, which was all types of exercise, aerobic exercise, coordination, agility, and resistance exercise, all of them showed improvement in global cognitive function, but specifically coordination exercises help the person more with speed of processing. So that means me understanding quicker something, me being able to react quicker to a different direction that I have to take. And the aerobic exercises, I said, where we have more stronger evidence, was shown better results for improving memory and executive functions, which we will go into detail now. I'll give you some examples for each one of these areas so that we can give this definition of what this means. Okay. So let's think about each one of those key areas now, and what does it mean, right? What is this examples of exercise for attention? So if I specifically am dealing with situations like listening to a conversation in a noisy restaurant, reading a book while someone else is watching TV, we wanted to give you examples here of what it means to either have focused attention or me being able to keep my attention for a longer period of time, or even being able to divide my attention, which is I'm trying to cook a meal and someone is just talking to me, and so I keep forgetting where I was when I go and get some ingredient. What was I going to get again? So those type of challenges.
I'm doing a lot of divided attention as I'm doing the chat over here. For anyone who's getting a chat response from Josefa, she's not that good. I'm doing it over here on a computer, or I'm logged in on her name. But yeah, dividing, when you come back, every time you do, there's a cost for that. There's some energy that you use. There's some attention that you use that you can't get back. You lose some of it. It's like energy. It loses it. And then
and
did I get back where you work?
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who say, no, I'm not good at multitasking yet, so I don't do it. But again, it's something that unfortunately is part of daily life, and we can't really run away from it all the time. But we can certainly, especially in Parkinson, as I said, so we have to find ways to train it. And that's why we were talking about, okay, this training of dual tasking. How do we do this? I would highlight this one, taking notes while listening to a presenter, which was placed here on purpose. You will have the slides, so please do not do that dual tasking. But more than give you examples, which are general, we did ask you in the questionnaires, okay, when do you feel that you have more difficulties with attention? And these were the results that people shared with us. So doing two things at once, like cooking while talking while watching TV, and etc. We have listening to instructions while performing a task. This was more than half of the people. So it's ignoring distractions such as background noise, and then losing track of what's happening in a movie or book you're reading. We all have a different cognitive way processing, right? Which is some people are really good at being able to laser focus on something, and they've always been like that, right? So a bomb can explode and they just focus on a task. So your individuality also weighs a lot here in these difficulties, while other people are very good at dividing their attention. And so it's just like, get to know yourself and see what you are good at and what you need to challenge yourself at. Other things that people mention, switching focus quickly between tasks, losing balance while performing mental tasks while moving, right? So this is where balance seems to be affected. Carrying objects while thinking about directions. I would say like walking in the streets and try to read your phone or GPS or something. And walking while talking was particularly the one that came out lowest it wasn't to my surprise. And you know why it's not a surprise? Because most people don't notice these effects. This is probably the most common thing that happens in Parkinson, where your speed of walking will be reduced when you are talking or engaging in a conversation. Typically, the person might even have the diagnosis because the arm was not moving while they were walking, and the family member noticed and said, what's wrong with your arm? Let's go to the doctor. This is a very common story. Surprising how common it is. So you might come to a point where you actually have to stop to be able to engage in conversation. Now, if you ask, does this happen as we get old? Yes, it does. Is it more marked in Parkinson? Yes. Well, so it's a very key area of training because we have lost that automaticity of being able to keep our balance and our posture and the motor responses as fast as we want due to Parkinson.
You're actually hitting on something that just showed up in the chat, so I might just tie it in now. Someone's asking, how do the percentages of these issues that people are reporting compare to people without Parkinson's?
Yes. So we do have research showing lots of studies comparing both people with and without, and that it's always highlighted that in these type of tasks like walking and keeping balance in certain situations is always worse in Parkinson. And now, when we think again about exercise, if this is something that is happening, then obviously, what do you think the best exercise would be? The best exercise if someone is having difficulty walking and talking is probably being able to apply that walking and talking. Do you all agree? So if I really want to be specific, now lots of things can stop you from walking and talking. You might not have someone to talk to. The person that's talking to you is very annoying. The weather. There's lots of things that have to go into when we think about, best exercise. I don't even like the term the best exercise, but this is how people usually ask us, right? The best exercise for you is this, right? So walking and talking, it's like if I'm having this difficulty, I can maybe start off by doing walking without talking and then integrating a little bit of talking and then taking it away. So there's different ways that we can approach this. And I'm imagining that people, when you do exercises in the gym, or treadmill, or with therapists, they are probably already challenging with this. You may be walking on the treadmill and the therapist is talking to you on purpose to see how your gait is being affected. Okay. And by this, she's training your resilience against that because she's correcting you as if something motor is compensating. Other exercises that you might see, this is just examples, simple, that has to do, in this case, balance, right? So this gentleman, his key issue is balance, and he's doing a very difficult cognitive exercise. He's starting on A. He has to touch with his right hand, and then he starts on P with his left hand rule. And then he has to go back with his right hand to B, and then he has to go to Q, and then he has to go to C, and then he has to go to... So you can see how complex cognitively this is. But what I really want to train within is him being able to not commit errors while I'm pushing him, so I'm provoking his balance. Obviously, this is safe because I know the person. But before I was not pushing him, he did it really quickly. It was super easy for him to do it. He's a germist, his cognition is well. But as soon as I started pushing, he started making more errors. So as you can see, it's not about if you have cognitive issues or not. It's about how the cognition interferes with the movement. And this is the type of that I would imagine therapists will be doing. Okay, so that was regarding attention, my ability to be able to keep my posture, my balance, and my capacity to walk and to imagine transfer, getting out of a chair while someone's talking to us. Let's go into something that's slightly complex, and which would be executive memory and executive function and memory, which kind of combines and has to do a lot with organizing, planning, strategic thinking, decision-making.
Fixing when somebody gets in your way, or modifying what you had planned as you're walking someplace, if someone moves something out of into your path or something like that. It's all the kind of stuff we do as we're progressing, and to keep track of what our target is, our goal is. Heading to the fridge or something.
And because they kind of interrelate each other, like working memory, my capacity to be able to get to the fridge and to remember what I was going to get. Now, I'm sure you know what? My wife does that, and she doesn't have part of it. Like
twice. Yeah.
Of course, yes, this happens because it has to do with my capacity to be able to remember what I'm going to go get, and at the same time be distracted by something else. We separated here in memory. So specifically to memory, what people mentioned were trouble remembering names and places.
Well, 70%, look at that.
Mm-hmm. And then we had forgetting what you were about to say in a conversation, which can mean a lot of things, fatigue coming in, or something happened and you were suddenly distracted to a sound in the room, and then you lose track of your thought.
Visual distractions when walking by or something too?
Each one of these, I would say, complaints or that people placed can be very interpreted with other in more detail. So we had forget recent conversations or events.
That's an interesting one too, because I think that in reality, memory deficits in Parkinson's, memory changes, are usually much more related to the attention side of it. You're not paying attention as well as you did, and so the memory didn't get consolidated and put into the brain. It's not at all like someone looked like another, like Alzheimer's or something like that, where the memory gets damaged after it's been encoded. It's like the distractibility is causing the issue.
Yeah. The example I like to give often is like somebody telling you are struggling to imagine getting out of a sofa or something, a very soft sofa. So we can all identify ourselves in it. and we're trying to get out of the couch and we're struggling, and then somebody is saying, hey, don't forget to bring that paper. And then you're so focused on trying to get out of the couch that obviously when you get up, by the exhaustion and focus that you had on the couch, you are going to forget the paper. So, and then usually his memory seems to be changing. It's true, but it's more about the attention. In that case, it's really about my capacity to be more attentive, divide my attention in what I'm hearing. You see the difference? Okay. So going on, we had situations like hard to learn new information, like new routes or exercises. And I will say that I usually like when my students, so I call them students, when the person is not learning something, I'm to blame. So it's the teacher, right? It's the method. It's if we have the right environment, I know by experience that even people with, the severe cognitive issues are able to learn. It really depends on how we are teaching and how patient we are and how much we repeat it, what environment it is. So I know that people are able to learn, right? I will defend this. And then keeping track of medication and appointments, which people have lots of support, so I didn't find it particularly noticeable that it was the last one. Jumping on to other examples that we talked about, this term called executive functions. We had people suggesting trouble solving unexpected problems, need external prompts like reminders to be able to remember an activity, hard to make decisions, even if it's small ones, planning your daily schedules, okay. And then we had managing finance, bills, and household responsibilities. I'm going to just jump forward here. If we have someone that is having difficulty with these type of challenges like planning thing and organizing, I want you to know that in most of the challenges of exercises that we do, when we are challenging you to remember a sequence, I want you to hit low and high. And maybe these are the amplitude movements that people do often, the Lisa Big program, which is more well known. But anyway, it's just if I can make it more cognitive and engaging the brain more and just having this working memory challenge, okay, twice in below, twice on top, the person has to be engaging the brain as well. Okay. Again, in line of the boxing as well, sequences that therapists might ask in your exercise routines is a way for you to train this executive function. This gentleman is just a quick example of someone that he would be distracted when he gets out of the chair. So what I'm simply doing is I'm touching 2 or 3 places, and he has to remember when he gets up, the effort of getting up, the exhaustion of getting up. And as he gets up, he has to remember where I touched. It seems simple, but it was very challenging for the gentleman. So different levels of difficulty we can always add in the cognition. Okay, let's think about visual spatial difficulties. And this means judging distance, avoiding obstacles. Often people will say, I seem to be going against the doorways a lot. Or, getting lost with the map. I think that's more like stress or visual directions, or being in a car and saying, I want to go there. And so I'm asking, so where do you live? And the person, there, left, right. So they're having difficulties, for example, giving instructions of verbal instructions against the stress.
That feels like verbal fluency to me at some point. Yeah.
Organizing visual information, right? But the most common one is bumping into furniture. And that is this. What this changes is visual spatial deficits are very defined in, for example, when we talk about going through small spaces and the stepping becomes smaller and it's more influenced. Being able to get to a chair and actually the person throwing themselves on the chair. That means the stepping counts, how many steps you counted for were not accurate in terms of parking on the sofa, for example. Or what you see in the middle is just someone trying to organize the space. She just keeps taking everything out of her bag, and things are falling off the chair. And both the therapist and the person did not notice that they actually had a chair next to them, so they could have managed that a little bit different. But it's just curious. It's things that happen in daily life that maybe we're not so attentive to. And if there's exercises to do, yes, there is, specifically in this line of visual spatial. is a lot of research being done because of freezing of gait, because these of analyzing space usually might bring on problems regarding the feet being more glued to the floor, which is a problem that can happen in Parkinson. And in this case, it's just a simple exercise where it's not even about the ball. The ball is just a distracting factor. What I'm doing is I'm making him look where he's sitting every time he throws the ball, because he actually had a fall at home regarding sitting down in the wrong place. Okay.
There's a good question up here. We can do it now or we can do it a bit later. Let me read it as it is, and then you can decide whether you want to come in here. In addition to exercises designed to address big physical effects like gait and balance, can you show examples of exercises to address small muscles? For example, everyone I know with PD, including me, has small lohulai symptoms like toe curling, mouth-tongue dyskinesia.
So
Curl.
what I would answer is from my experience, the more global an activity is, probably you'll have the best results. So if I'm trying to improve hand function, if I do aerobic exercise, I will probably have more effect over the brain than actually doing this.
Practicing that.
At this moment, I defend myself like the amount of research that we have does not support very small movements for these small problems that you are mentioning. So even of dyskinesia, that the more we can promote aerobic exercise in whatever form. So swimming, boxing, just moving, making sure that you are sweating. Those will have greater influence on the brain and potentially help you with that. That doesn't mean we want to take away hope from doing small things, because you perceiving that an exercise that I'm doing is going to help me, like for example, my hand function or toes. It's good for your motivation and feel that you are addressing a problem. But I would really reinforce that it's about global strategies that we have the best results.
I kind of make the analog too or the analogy to people talk about facial masking, and it's like the best exercises probably to address that are going to be ones that work on bigger amplitude and directly working on stretching. Again, it's not counterproductive. It's just not efficient, and it's probably not going to show the benefits. I do want to point out that the person talking about toe curling and dyskinesia, toe curling often usually is an indication of a dystonia that's related to a medication, and it's something you should talk about with the doctor. And dyskinesias are actually a side effect of too much medication. So that's another issue. Exercise is probably going to take a backseat to talking with the doctor about medications. I will say, though, that exercises tend to make your medications work more efficiently. So it's not wasted effort. But if you're really dealing with that specific issue, that's a doctor question in addition to doing the exercise.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Nothing. Toe curling is usually because it can be painful, and then people think about stretching exercises, and that's okay. But make sure that you have adjusted your medications and that there is nothing that you can do medical wise in terms of that against the problem before you go that route, because people might wake up in the morning and feel their toes cold. And the truth is, by adjusting the medication in the morning, that problem disappears, right? It's managed.
Yeah.
And can disappear, it's true. So it depends if it's an off dystonia. These are particularly complication in situations, adverse events. Okay. But I'm happy to exchange after some more detail and suggestions. I like to be creative in exercises, but we may have to know the limits of what we can do. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly talk about, or John, maybe you can approach this communication one.
Well, here, I'll just go through them real quickly. And we know this is quite often an issue that people are going to have trouble finding the right words during conversations, feel like your thoughts aren't coming clearly. This verbal fluency, as we call it in Parkinson's land, in speech therapy land, it's a very common issue. And again, it's one of the things where we try to incorporate along with some of the dual tasks. I will say directly drilling words that begin with the letter A isn't going to necessarily give you the results, but it doesn't hurt it. It's just why we try to do it in conjunction with physical activity at the same time. You got it there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Understanding fast speech or complex instructions. And again, this goes back to kind of a working memory, or I would even say an attention. And then the attention to me is the coin of the realm. And then if attention is impaired, then everything else that's happening is going to be impaired with it. And that's why that is. And people should be aware of that and should be talking with breaks and pauses, like I'm trying to do better now, and also have it at a speed that's consumable. And if someone's talking too much, it's your right to be like, slow it down. Okay, you a couple more in there?
He's saying, I will understand it, quickly if you explain it to me slowly.
Yeah.
I just love that one.
What's that one for them? What military movie? It's like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that's the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, again, following multi-step directions is attention-related, comprehending written information. This is an interesting one, and I think a lot of people have this issue, and it's a matter of being able to stay focused. It's your focused attention, not your selective attention. Facial expressions, social cues. This is interesting. I think not too long ago, we didn't know about this, but I think we're understanding that people with Parkinson's sometimes have some changes in their ability to kind of read other people's it's like an emotional intelligence, reading those kind of cues. And it just could also be part of keeping up with the conversation so that by the time you come in there, what you wanted was probably better 30 seconds before, and it makes you look like you're out of step. So it's not actually not knowing it, but it can be not knowing it as well.
And I would highlight that situation, for example, if you feel like if you have balance issues and you are in standing position, trying to engage with someone, you need to have cognitive resources to be able to keep your balance so that you don't fall or you feel safe. And by using those cognitive resources, it means that whatever conversation you're having doesn't have your total focus, right? So by learning this about yourself, it's like, you know what, when I really want to have a meaningful conversation, I'm just going to sit down and have a conversation. Okay, so going forward, I think we are almost finishing.
Yeah.
So, and another example in terms of speech and communication issues, exercises that can be done.
And again, for those of you who joined us on actually the class was today, the voice, speech, and communication class, this is all pretty familiar stuff to you. And
Take care.
While LSVT Global has great research and Speak Out's a fun program, we just do our best to take the voice part of it, the cognitive component, and then also add in some more movements with it, so it's a little more it's comprehensive. It's kind of what we're doing. We're talking and we're walking with someone, and someone's in our way, and we keep walking, and we don't say, "Oh, I need to stop and replan everything," unless you have to. You might also have to tell someone, "Excuse me," so they get out of your way while you keep doing it, and that's why we do it this way. And again, this is all part of these classes are all free. That's why we're talking. We're not sales pitching people. It's like they're a partnership with the Nova Parkinson Mood Disorder Center. So I feel pretty comfortable telling people, come join us. It's a lot of fun. It's my favorite part of every day.
Oops. Sure. Okay, so summarizing what we were trying to share with you, a global image or idea about how cognition is being managed at this moment, specifically in terms of exercise. So most of the exercises that you're probably doing, you are already challenging your cognitive function. Even in programs like Imagine Tai Chi, which has a very strict protocol, it was interesting because the study compared a group of people doing Tai Chi in group format or doing it at home alone. And actually the results were more in favor in terms of improvement of cognition of the group format. Why? Because you have lots of interaction that happens before class and after. So really the engagement with others is also a very strong component that has to be highlighted more and more. So I'm pretty sure you guys are already doing something good. And then just keeping an eye out for the more and more therapists are gaining more knowledge about how to try to add in cognition into your exercise routine so they can focus on these key areas. But my final message is it always has to be a comfortable experience because we are still doing a lot of trial and error, which sometimes we might do too much and then the person feels uncomfortable. So for me, the main criteria main outcome is it has to feel comfortable. It means I'm teaching the person at a like speed. I'm about stressing the person. I might have moments where I do want to train the stress with the person, but it has to end in a fun way. So I hope that is a key message. Don't allow anyone to put you in a position where you might not feel so bright. Okay? That's not fair. It's not fair.
We see it a lot sometimes in clinicians, and it feels like it's like it's an erector set. You're like, okay, you put this here, you put that there, and that connects there. And okay, the next thing is this. And it's like, no, it's much more organic and fluid, and it's it's going to fluctuate, just like your energy level is going to fluctuate. So you have to be aware of it and modify it on the fly.
Yeah.
Read the room.
And it's possible to apply with anyone. It depends where we start. Okay. So if something's very hard, which means we build up towards where we want to go, it's just where we start. If everyone's okay in terms of questions,
Yeah.
I had just 2 or 3 questions that people placed in the questionnaire that I'll just quickly go through.
Sure.
Which is, one of the questions was, how do you measure the success of a particular exercise in regard to cognitive benefits? And it's true, like in like strength, I can maybe measure how much the person improved or balanced. In cognition, you do those, you can do tests, but overall it's like, how do we convince people they're getting better? Well, it's helping them recognize sentences that they tell us that, you know what, this is direct effect from the training that you've done. And this is actually someone that started doing the dual tasking, and it's a interesting experience, because she always says that she's doing the class and she's hearing everyone else, and it's very upsetting. But now it's becoming easier. And she actually told us last Friday in our class, where she says, I feel that since I started these classes, I am more tolerant to talking and driving. So there are specific things in daily life that you might not notice that you're actually doing faster, or at least with less stress. And that could be the direct result. But unfortunately, we don't have very strong tools to be able to assess that.
Well, and hopefully her voice is loud so she can tell someone, pishka, pishka, which means turn on your turn signal or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So another comment was the neuropsychiatrics recommended cognitive retraining, but my neurologist didn't know what it is. So what I'm guessing is probably they wanted to say cognitive training, or retrain. I think it's a question of concept, but I think what's implicit here is what I mentioned about cognitive training. So you're doing some sort of cognitive training. And the neurologist will probably recognize cognitive training, but not retraining.
Interesting. For psychiatrists too, we're usually focused on the meds.
Yeah, I think it's a question of concepts.
Yeah.
And then someone else said, don't quite understand dual tasking and not sure it is much of a problem for me. And I placed this one on purpose here to be able to reinforce that most of these difficulties, especially the one regarding attention, people might not notice them. People with Parkinson will have difficulty noticing them, because if you did, then you imagine your posture. Someone says, you put yourself right. It's like you didn't have the idea that you weren't upright. And that's probably you were so engaged in your phone, for example, that you started bending over a little bit more than usual. And this is the capacity to be able to divide my attention between what I'm doing in my hands versus my posture. So I understand that it is hard for people to recognize the issue, and but there are solutions, and so it's worth us highlighting that they exist.
I would say that it's not just for people with Parkinson's. The dual task interference effect is more severe, but if you're a Homo sapien, you're bad at dual tasking. I'm also bad at dual tasking.
Yeah. Well, they're not particularly worse. So
thank you. Yes. Moving on.
It's a well-known fact. Sorry, the science behind this. So everyone, just the last one was someone that commented, I believe that the best exercise for cognition is playing a musical instrument at a serious demanding level. I love this definition. I also study foreign languages, which keeps the brain alert. My goodness, yes. So playing an instrument, we can consider exercise, of course. It's engaging the brain.
Strengthening, fine.
So a lot of cognitive. If I had to add in something, just I'm sure people are already doing some sort of aerobic exercise. Remember, that's the strongest evidence. So, I hope you can proceed that when you do an exercise, that after your exercise class, you feel very alert and that you feel better in terms of communication. So, yes, I think that was basically it. And then someone, a family member said how to get motivated to do the exercises. That is a very, very big question that deserves a talk on it. Motivating people can be very challenging for sure. I hope that having lots of exercise options, so people can go through different things and make sure and then feel comfortable in selecting one that works best. Having family to support, having an exercise buddy. There's lots of strategies that people use. I think the best one is really having someone else with Parkinson come in and help the person do it as well, or do it with the person. That usually works the best if you are able to access support groups and other people with Parkinson, which has become much easier at this moment. yes, so I will stop sharing and really hope that somehow the information was useful to you. Please do feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to explain a little bit. This is like in 1 hour, how do we say something useful to everyone?
I've tried to go through into the chat, so it's mostly pretty well answered. If anyone has anything that I've missed, please feel free to unmute it and we can get to it for sure. Or you can always ask us. You've got the emails from us, so we'll be happy to happy to follow up.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good one. We'll catch up with you next week and join some of our classes.
Do you have any question that I'm happy to give you suggestions. I do that for many people, and it gives me joy if people can use the ideas.
Yeah. Now, thank you, folks. See you all soon. Thanks for coming in.